It's curious. You mentioned dum-dum bullets.
Israel knows that there's what you might call an absorptive capacity of international public opinion when it comes to killing Palestinians. When you pass a certain threshold, international public opinion becomes indignant and outraged. And so now what they're doing is they're aiming for the kneecaps. They're targeting the kneecaps in order to permanently handicap the Palestinians or to force amputation. And it's diabolical in the sense that Israel has its pulse, not just on Western public opinion, but on the media. And so the media only report casualties, deaths. So in the case, amazing as it may sound, one of the major, I can't recall which official it is right now, maybe he's from UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency. He said there were 7 days of demonstrations, 7 Fridays. There were more injuries in those 7 Fridays beginning March 30th than there were injuries in all of Operation Protective Edge, which lasted 51 days from July 7th to August 26th, because they're trying to inflict these permanent injuries on the Palestinians, but which will get no media attention because they're just injured, they weren't killed.
Let's take some question.
Joe?
Could you speculate on what goes on in the minds of the Israeli leadership and the people who pull the triggers?
The question is, could I speculate on what goes on in the alleged minds of the Israeli leadership? It's not really difficult to divine, to discern, to figure out what goes on in their minds. The current leadership is wholly unlike its predecessors, who were convinced Zionists, and they did have a vision and an ideology, and they also had a genuine devotion to the cause that they avowed. They were the ideological generation, like, so to speak, what were called in the case of the Soviet Union, the old Bolsheviks. And many of the old leadership, they were themselves pretty close to being the Bolsheviks. They came from the same tradition, which had its virtues and its dark side. The virtue was they were really not committed to privilege, to power as such. They were committed to the cause. The dark side was, like the Leninists, they were completely ruthless in their commitment to the cause. The new generation, people like Netanyahu, he has no commitment to anything except himself. He wants to win. So it's a case of assessing who are the main threats. When I say threats, I mean domestic. Who are the main domestic threats to his power, and how does he fend them off? It's pure party politics. So let's take a simple example. Take the case of the deal with Iran. It wasn't just Obama and his administration who supported that deal. Nearly the whole of Israel's military and security leadership, they supported it. They said it was a good deal. if Netanyahu opposed it, it was not because he had more insight or even doubted that it was a good deal. He knew it was a good deal. It was because there were a powerful people to his right who were attacking the deal with Iran. And so for purely political reasons, not because of any devotion to the state of Israel, not for any devotion to the state of Israel, but because of politics. In the case of Gaza, it is true that they have this mindset which goes back to the old ideological leadership. You saw it a lot in people like David Ben-Gurion, Moshe Dayan, and others, that Arabs only understand the language of force. That if you show any weakness, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. And so you have to keep clobbering them until, in the immortal words of Ronald Reagan when he spoke about the Sandinistas, until they cry uncle. Palestinians, whether you agree or not, it's beside the point. Hamas has repeatedly said it's open to a long-term, sometimes they say 30 years, sometimes they say 40 years, a long-term ceasefire with Israel. They're ready for it. Just end the siege. That's the quid pro quo. End the siege, we're willing to sign a long-term ceasefire. Israel doesn't even consider it. Netanyahu won't even consider it. Because that would imply you're negotiating with them, as it were, as equals. But you don't negotiate with Arabs. You beat them. That's the mindset. Are there ways to resolve this situation now, maybe even to the detriment of the Palestinians? Yes. But Israel won't entertain that idea. You have to first take out the big club and crack their skull. That's the only way you can deal with Arabs. Mm-hmm.
All right, any more questions for Norman? I saw your hand went up, and then you, then Mitch.
I think even though Israel is clearly the dominant power in the region, wouldn't you say Egypt plays a role in the crisis in Gaza because they have a border pass and they're...
Yes. Egypt plays a role. Egypt works with Israel.
I feel like some of the blame they don't get enough blame, as much blame as they deserve.
Because under international law, Egypt doesn't have any legal responsibility for Gaza. Israel is the occupying power. It is true, under international law, there is a right of peoples to seek refuge when they're threatened. So Egypt has, in that sense, an obligation to open its border. But on the other hand, as a technicality, any country has the right to seal its border. It's heartless, but it's true. But Israel is the occupying power. So under the Fourth Geneva Convention, it's the responsibility of Israel to provide for the population. I have to add that Egypt, even though I deplore the Sisi regime, I found it especially amusing that on May 14th, when Israel committed the massacre in Gaza, Egypt denounced Israel for killing innocent demonstrators. This is the guy who killed more than 1,000 non-violent demonstrators in Rabiah Square in August 2013. And he's denouncing Israel. It's just funny. You know, you have to acknowledge that if Egypt opened its border to rescue refugees seeking refuge, the fact is all of Gaza would empty out, which is just what Israel wants. And you know they're not going to let them back. So it is a problem. But go ahead.
Yes, so I guess the first part is, this is about resolution to the conflict. And what would be your most wanted or most desired way to resolve the conflict? And this isn't just about sort of ending the siege and the conflict
Well,
itself.
I'm going to be honest with you. I've made a commitment. I'm not going to discuss that question. Because you can only discuss political questions when there are political possibilities. Otherwise, it's what Professor Chomsky used to say. It's a wonderful topic for an academic seminar in philosophy that has no relevance to politics. Right now, in the current situation, there's no possibility whatsoever of achieving anything of any substance and any value to Palestinians in terms of a settlement. We have to, as the African American spiritual says, keep our eyes on the prize. And right now, we have to focus on ending the siege. That's what the people of Gaza want, to end that siege. And it's, in my opinion, morally criminal to be having these totally vacuous, abstract, irrelevant discussions about 1 state, 2 states, 6 states, or 12 states. They have no bearing whatsoever in reality at the moment. Maybe things will change, but for the moment, there's no basis for any substantive discussion about resolving the conflict. It's irrelevant. Anyone else? Yes.
Wouldn't the basis be it's international law, the 1967 borders, and that is what...
It's not on the table now.
Not on the table, but it exists, it is the law.
There are no forces out there that's ready now to enforce that law. You have to look at the balance of political forces. And right now, there's a reasonable possibility that there's enough public sentiment out there to end the siege. If you look at, for example, the public figures who represent large swaths of public opinion, people like Bernie Sanders, he said a lot about the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, ending the siege. That's possible. It's on, for the moment, it's on the political agenda. There's nothing on the political agenda at the moment, to resolve the conflict, because the fundamental thing is missing. There's no mass movement among Palestinians. The West Bank has been pacified. It's a very striking fact that in all the weeks of the siege of Gaza, the largest demonstration, was 1,500 people in Ramallah.
You spoke about the mindset of the Israeli government. What about the working people, the Israeli citizens? What divisions are there? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's hopeless. I don't say it glibly, and I don't say it happily. I don't say it to strike radical or revolutionary poses. The state of Israel, its population, is more or less like the American South just before the Civil Rights Movement, and then during the Civil Rights Movement. There are very mean people. There's the racism, the Jewish supremacy, the arrogance, the obnoxiousness, the cold indifference to Arab life. That's not just predominant and pervasive, it's overwhelming. I don't think one should invest even 5 minutes at this moment. I don't think that one should invest even 5 minutes in trying to reach the Israeli public. It's a complete and total squandering of time. It's just as if you were trying to reach white folks in the American South. Total waste of time. There were a handful of decent white people in the South. End of story. It's not how the South was desegregated. It was desegregated because the African American population organized, the African American population made demands which cannot be credibly dismissed. Our rights under the Constitution, our rights under Brown versus Board of Ed, the fact that the United States was being humiliated internationally as it claimed to be the leader of the free world, but see what's happening in the South. The fact that there were sympathetic supporters, the civil rights movement managed to organize a large block of sympathy among whites in the North, and that the federal government was finally forced to act. But nobody wasted time trying to organize white people in the American South. That was clearly seen as ridiculous. You can count on the fingers of your hands in any southern town the number of supporters you could find, white supporters. And it's the same thing in Israel. As I say, I don't say gleefully, I wish it were otherwise, but that's a very ugly place now. Yes.
She hasn't spoken.
Norman, you said a moment ago, Conrad, that there's no resistance movement in the West Bank, that they showed no support for Gaza. But when the people do try to stand up, the leaders are assassinated by Israel. And also, if people do have the demonstrations, as in Berlin, the people are either killed, they're shot, or their children are imprisoned, or, as you say, they're aiming to cripple them, aiming for the knees. So people have been beaten down.
Look, you know, I was giving you the bottom line. I didn't give you the numbers in which I got the sum. There are many reasons for why the West Bank has been successfully pacified. One reason, obviously, is there's a very effective security force there, trained by Israel, Jordan, CIA, Egypt. Very effective security. It's not a rinky-dink operation anymore. It used to be rinky-dink with Keystone Cops. But now, no, they're a very serious security apparatus, works hand in glove, literally. Well, not literally, because you can't literally work hand in glove, but works hand in glove with Israel, and the security cooperation is the sine qua non of Oslo. You know, they don't care what Abbas says, they don't care what that imbecile Saab Erekat says. All they care about is what they call security cooperation, namely their collaborators. But that's just one factor, we have to be clear about that. Because there have been very repressive regimes in the world where people did organize and overthrow them. That's one factor. There is the cynicism with politics. There is the sense of every man for himself. There's the fact that all the civil society organizations have been hollowed out. There are no longer trade unions. There are no longer women's organizations. There are no mass organizations anymore. Israel's not stupid. We should be very clear about that. They took a gamble with Oslo, but the essence of Oslo was we need to find some collaborators who will do our dirty work because we got such bad PR during the first Intifada. So we need Palestinians to do the torture, do the killing, and to sustain the occupation. So they had a good strategy. It was quite clever. It had many aspects to it. There's the overt aspects like organizing a sophisticated security apparatus. But there were also more subtle aspects. So, for example, there were a lot of very clever young people in the occupied, let's say in the West Bank, and clever young people who aspired to politics. They joined mass organizations. There was literally not a single person in Gaza, not a single person in the whole occupied Palestine who didn't belong to a political party. Everyone belonged to a political party. And everyone belonged to some union or mass organization. So what did Israel do? It was quite clever. Every time they spotted somebody who had talent, every time they spotted somebody who had ability, they and the Europeans, they scooped them up, gave them a computer terminal and a cubicle in Ramallah, and now you're working for an NGO. And you know, Ramallah now is one of the most expensive cities in the world. It's a very expensive city. And they have a very good life. Relatively speaking, it's quite a good life. A very high standard, cafes, high society, beautiful architecture. My friend Alan there, Comrade Alan, even though he'll kill me for saying Comrade Alan, he said to me, like, Tel Aviv is such a dump next to Ramallah. He was actually shocked. And now you get invested in the process. So the NGOs say whatever you want on the social media. You can call for one state, you can call for a democratic sector, you can say whatever you want on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. You can say whatever you want. Just don't do anything. And they know where the line is. The line is if you do anything. And so the whole of Ramallah's landscape is dotted with these NGOs, which actually do absolutely nothing. But they give you a privileged lifestyle, and most importantly, they have stripped all the mass organizations of any talent. All the talent that used to be in the women's organizations, the trade unions and everything, they're now in cafes in Ramallah. And that was, you know, Ramallah is like the storm center of the Palestinian revolution. 1,500 people. And that was after May 14. 1,500. That's the best they could do. So yes, there's the element of repression, but I'm sure, or maybe you're not that it makes a big difference, but one of the things that oh my God, Gramsci, one of the important contributions he is said to have made to the understanding of the state is the state is not just about repression. It's a way to gain hegemony, as he called it, in more subtle ways. And Israel, nowadays they call it hard and soft power. And Israel has made very effective use of soft power. All of these organizations, Seeds for Peace, Plants for Peace, granola for peace, yogurt for peace, they all have the same purpose. And everybody understands the rules of the game. If you belong to any of these organizations, you get to come to the United States. You get to come to the United States. And then it's like being let out of a concentration camp. It's just, you're in the States, you're in the United States. And then your stay ends. And then you go back. And what's at the top of everybody's head? Going back. And they know to go back, you can say some things, but you can't say others. Because if you say those other things, you're out. So they want to go back. And I understand it. I understand it. I can't pretend that if I were in their shoes, I would calculate differently. But we have to be honest and recognize what are the consequences when you get caught in that dynamic. I have many people who call me, write me, should I do this? Should I join blah, blah, blah for peace? Should I join blah, blah, blah for peace? And I give him an honest, I say, I understand where you're coming from, but you have to understand what are the rules of the game. You can say some things, and if you say other things, when you go back, you're not coming back again.
Those were some insightful comments. If I could just take 2 minutes to talk about something in Haiti, which I've been to many times. They call it the nation of NGOs. In Haiti, there are literally, hold on to your pants, 10,000 NGOs. And there was a reformist candidate who ran for president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, a Catholic priest, who brought everybody out of the woodwork when there was dictatorship there. The left came out, they got a job somewhere in an NGO or serving the government. And what has happened is an incredible depolitization of the country. The left is virtually not existent now, except for 1 or 2 small groups. There was an occupation there with Bill Clinton, came in with Aristide and imposed the World Trade Bank agenda on the country. So everything is a struggle to exist. All of the left keeps saying, as Norman says, should I take this job? Should I not take the job? They end up taking the job, okay? And it's important, I think, to build revolutionary organizations with a perspective on this whole world tendency that is taking place to get bought off, to get a position, to do something quote-unquote progressive, versus revolution versus socialism and party building. I know Norman has had enough of my kind of guy, maybe, I don't know. But I see this as a very real danger worldwide, and there needs to be political clarification in Palestine, in Haiti, and as well in South Africa, where you have megalomaniacs like the current president, Ramaphosa, and the one before him, who used the movement, the working class movement, for personal gain. And the most recent president, and I'll end with this, had 750 charges of corruption against him. Can't remember his name this second, I'm a 68-year-old guy. But this was Zuma, correct. This was the president of the party of the ANC, the African National Congress, the Communist Party, very prominent in it. Mandela was a communist, as we know. So that's what's happening worldwide. And I think Socialist Action is playing a very positive role in clarifying political issues. Okay, that's my speech.